Po bëj dokumentarin për historinë e nënës time, Zojës. Edhe është përvojë shumë e mirë, shumë e bukur. Edhe e thimbshme, po e përjetoj shumë mirë. Në fakt, këto kohë më është kujtuar shumë shpesh Zoja. Edhe këto ditë e kam menduar këto kohë shumë shpesh, po si se bëra për Zojën të gjithë. Që Zoja t'ishte në atë sallë edhe ta shifte filmin e jetës vet. Dhe e kam një lloj pengu kështu. Për Zojën kam shumë pengje në fakt. Shumë. Për Zojën se për babën tjetër që baba nuk ka vujt sa Zoja, edhe pse baba ka qenë burg. Se nuk është vonë, nuk po them se është vonë, po është një ndër gjërat që po bëj shumë mirë, që po e bëj bashkë me ty. Edhe s'është vonë, fakt, shumë mirë është. Beti nuk ja njohu askush kurrë vuajtjen, edhe ajo ka vujt shumë. Dhe se nuk kam arritur unë ta ndaj prej nënës, se duhet ta kisha ndarë me kohë, dhe po ta kisha ndarë, që ta shifja shumë në distancë historinë e Zojës. Me siguri do ta kisha bërë me kohë. Megjithatë është një periudhë që po e kam me shumë qefe, me shumë optimizëm këtë xhirimet, skenari që është gegnisht, shumë mirë. Edhe them se do jetë një gjë shumë e mirë për shpirtin e Zojës, domethënë, për emrin e saj, se s'është vetëm për atë, është për shumë të tjera gra që kanë qenë si Zoja. Se s'është sigurisht janë me qindra mbase me mira gra që kanë vujt shumë. Besoj nga vjeshta do mbaroj.
The world I knew was like paradise when I saw Gjelosh. He had completed his schooling in Italy and was a teacher in our province. All the other girls envied me, as I was the luckiest girl in all regions. He was my destiny. For over a year, the thunder of gunfire never ceased. casting a shadow of tragedy over the stone towers of our province called Gjeloshin. These were not the sounds of Slavic or Turkish invaders, but the deafening blasts of communist guns aimed at Albanian mountaineers. Death relentlessly pursued life, aiming to shatter both the body and the spirit. Just like every morning, I handed my father his jacket, and then he headed down to the village center. It was still early when the shots rang out, their echoes reverberating through the village. I had a gut feeling that something terrible had occurred, so I ran down a sloping path towards the hills. When I reached the scene,
Atër jom nisu, e kom shkuar, të ureri. E kom shumë të vështirë. Dhe da I kish krahti e shnorë si mund, kur nuk mund e mërthyet e pullën që ku po e mërthyet qikan. E kom qua qështu me këshyri u ki pavnu rëgos gjaku që ka që trash. E më ka ratë thikë aty, se më ka para kurë. Më ratë thikë të muaj. E briti nana me të madhe shyshja, thashë, zëtër. Të nëzmija thali këtë shërë po më shkojnë, po jesë pa kërë.
my father, my first sorrow. We were left with our mother and 9 other children, and the happy days were behind us. Nevertheless, I held on to hope because Gjelosh was still with me. It hadn't been more than 3 months, and we were to be married. I would wear my wedding veil, and the wedding date had been fixed even before my father's passing. We had each other's support throughout life's challenges. I became a bride in Gjelosh's tower, which was renowned in the highlands for its honor and bravery. When my son Nick was born, we were filled with happiness. However, it was not to be. The communists had reached the mountain villages as well. The echoes of their gunfire reverberated through the highlands, initially targeting those who were educated. My husband was a teacher who had started a few classes to educate the local children. It was the autumn of 1948, and on one fateful day, Gjelosh set out with his bag for school. He left early in the morning, even before dawn, and typically returned late in the evening. But on that day, he didn't come back early. Gjelosh had been arrested right in front of his students. I was pregnant for the second time when rumors began circulating that Gjelosh was facing execution. I remained in the tower with Nick and Gjelosh's mother, Sophie. As night fell, my labor pains started. I gave birth to a girl, comforted her, and sat down to breastfeed her. Suddenly, armed security forces arrived, and their shouts were terrifying. They ordered us to leave. We had no idea where they would take us. I was filled with fear. We walked for 7 hours, crossing the mountain pass. I carried the cradle on my back while Sophie held Nick. Both children were crying, and even Sophie was in tears. I had to remain strong. Oh, God, help me.
Në gjithik të djedhen luleta është të në mes natë, e kom pasën barkën natën 7 sa hati më kanë njësë për internin në ta. Në qik. Së mujnë, kom shumë të vështirë, se qatë s'ka pa, ku shkur kam pa.
Eventually, we arrived in the town of Tropage and were placed in an interrogation room. The interrogator shouted, "Where's the enemy of the people hiding?" I didn't know how to respond. "I don't know what you're talking about. Who is he?" "Your husband, Gjelosh," he shouted. "You must know where he is since you've arrested him. I don't know where he is. I've heard that you killed him." "Don't worry, we'll soon eliminate him," he replied. They released us when they realized I wouldn't speak. We set off with Sophie and the children and reached our home. They had raided our house and left nothing. I sat down to breastfeed the baby, but she just cried. I realized I had no more milk to give her due to distress. Sophie came and brought me a little whey. I tried to find some milk in the village to feed the baby. She got sick, and a few days later, she died.
Tani harroja qik nuk e harroj kur. Për të në mollë dynja se bëjt gjallë si një jush. Se që ajo më ka shku prezën. Se që do kom hjeku fëmive të kodalë zëtë gjithmonë. Po atë nuk ishte kur që vaj.
My heart was shattered. My little girl had turned to ice. With some of Gjelosh's cousins, we buried her. I held my head down, crying quietly to avoid upsetting my son. I was terrified when I saw them again approaching the yard. They were shouting like beasts, commanding us to get up and leave. They didn't give us a single minute. We set off with only the clothes we had on. We walked all day and finally reached the town, where a large group of people had gathered in a square. Women, children, and the elderly were all surrounded by the police. Several cars arrived and lined up near us. I held the trembling boy in my arms and reassured him, saying, Don't be afraid, my son. We're together. Don't be afraid. A friend of Gjelosh approached me and said, "You will be interned at Tepelina camp. If you take your son there with you, he will die of hunger or disease. Give your son to me, and I will take him to your mother." I didn't know what to do. How could I leave my child behind? Just a few days earlier, I had buried my little girl. I turned to my son, Nick, and said, "You will go with your father's cousin, who will take you to your grandmother's house. I will join you later." The child was frightened and stopped crying. It was as if he had become still and silent. When I released his tiny hand, it felt like a part of my soul had separated from my body. I watched that man holding my child and began to recite the prayer of Saint Mary. We traveled by trucks for a day and a half until we reached a hill. They placed us in a barracks. Before dawn, they woke us up for roll call in the camp yard. They called out everyone's names, even the babies, and the mothers would respond. They provided only one piece of bread for the entire day, and we drank water from a kettle. Soap was scarce, and sickness spread throughout the camp. There was no doctor or medicine available. Everywhere you looked, you saw children on their mothers' backs, suffering and moaning. I couldn't fathom how many of them managed to survive that place. My thoughts were always with Nick. After 2 years, they released me, but Sophie remained imprisoned. I embarked on a week-long journey on foot from Tepelina, hoped to reunite with my child. As I neared the entrance to the courtyard, anxiety gnawed at me, fearing I wouldn't find my child there. But then, as I approached, I heard his voice. My mother then approached me saying, "Gjelosh narrowly escaped execution by the communists." I spent that night with my mother, siblings, and relatives. The following day, I began my journey back to my home, Gjelosh's tower. I brought the boy, along with the few supplies my mother had provided, and set out. Upon my arrival, I was greeted with a yard filled with debris, and the house had suffered extensive damage. A few hours later, the head of the local council arrived and informed me that Gjelosh had been sentenced to 25 years in prison. A sentence that felt to me like a lifetime. People in the village said, "This tower is being hit so hard that it will be destroyed." But no, that's not true. God guides a person through all kinds of challenging situations, but always provides a way out. The course of one's life follows the path that God assigns. My journey was nothing more than an effort to keep the door of our tower open. At first, I made the decision to visit Gjelosh in prison. Early in the morning, my Uncle Lulz and I set out on our journey. Our journey to prison spanned about a week, involving both car rides and long walks. Finally, we arrived at the entrance of the prison. We were waiting there when we heard a voice calling Gjelosh's name. It was a dark corridor, and we saw him as a shadow. When I saw that pale face, hairless, without teeth in his mouth, emaciated, he remained silent, simply offering a sorrowful smile. That day will forever be etched in my memory. I often wish I had never laid eyes on him. Gjelosh was no longer himself. He couldn't even utter a word. I got the impression that he wished to part from me forever on that fateful day. My heart ached deeply. Gjelosh said to me, "Zoe, I will never make it out of this prison alive. Don't wait for me. Take your son to your mother's house and marry someone else." I replied, "If you want me to wait for you, you'll find me at the prison door in 3 months. Otherwise..." When we reached my mother's house, I shared the news about Gjelosh. She advised, "Zoe, stay here. Don't return to that tower. You've endured enough suffering. Remain here. We'll share a piece of bread, and together we'll raise your son. Perhaps with the help of God, you'll find happiness elsewhere." But what happiness can I find without my son and Gjelosh? Where can I leave that lonely elderly woman, my mother-in-law? No, Mother. As long as I'm alive, I won't shut the door to Gjelosh's tower. Three months passed. It was winter, but I had to go visit Gjelosh. My uncle had passed away, and I had no close relatives to accompany me on the journey. Sophie told me not to go, because it would be difficult to travel alone. But I had made up my mind. I went to the cellar and retrieved my father's clothes. The bloodstains were still visible, along with the bullet hole. I put on the suit, tied my hair back, and covered myself with a hood and scarf around my neck. I walked for more than 1 week in the snow. I stopped wherever I could to rest and slept in the corners of buildings or under bridges, wherever I could find shelter. When I arrived at the prison gate dressed as a man, Gjelosh was taken aback. "Zoe, why are you wearing men's clothes?" he asked. Tears welled up in his eyes. I couldn't tell if they were tears of joy or regret. "Zoe, never come back to this prison. God will help me and perhaps I'll survive." I repeat that journey every 3 months, and I never miss the day of our meeting at the prison gate. I encountered numerous women on those challenging journeys. Mothers of young sons imprisoned, wives with orphan children, and newlywed brides with their husbands in prison. These women provided me with the strength and faith to persist in that mission. I resided in that tower with Sophie and my son, and I always kept the fire in the hearth burning. I survived through hard work and the help of God and my mother. God willing, even Gjelosh returned home alive. We started again from the beginning. Our son had grown, and our daughters are also born. The struggle against communism continued for many more years. One day, the school doors opened for our children. And that was everything I had wished for.